Today we explore the story of the 12 labours of Heracles, one of the greatest legends from ancient Greek mythology. Imagine a man so strong he could fight lions with his bare hands, wrestle rivers into submission, and even outwit the gods themselves. This man was Heracles, known to the Romans as Hercules, the son of Zeus, king of the gods, and a mortal woman named Alcmene. His story is one of triumph and tragedy, of punishment and redemption, and of challenges so impossible that only the greatest hero of Greece could hope to overcome them. But Heracles' strength was not a gift he could enjoy freely. It came with a heavy price. Because of the jealousy of Hera, Zeus' wife, Heracles' life was cursed with suffering. And when Hera drove him into a fit of madness, causing him to commit a terrible crime against his own family, Heracles sought forgiveness. To atone, he was given a task by King Eurystheus: complete 12 impossible labours, each more dangerous than the last. These were not simple tests of muscle. They were trials of courage, wit and endurance. From slaying the monstrous Nemean lion to capturing Cerberus, the hound of the underworld, each labour pushed Heracles closer to eternal glory. This is the story of those 12 labours, a saga of gods, beasts, and the unbreakable will of a hero. And so, with the stage set, we now step deeper into the life of Heracles and the trials that would define him. Heracles' story begins not with triumph, but with tragedy. Despite being the son of Zeus, his life was never easy. Hera, the queen of the gods and wife of Zeus, despised him from birth. She saw him as proof of Zeus' unfaithfulness, and she swore to make Heracles suffer at every turn. Even as a baby, she tried to destroy him, sending serpents to kill him in his cradle. Yet the infant Heracles showed his strength early. With his tiny hands, he strangled the snakes, proving he was no ordinary child. But Hera's wrath was relentless. Years later, when Heracles grew into a man admired for his strength and courage, she struck again. She cluttered his mind with madness. In his frenzy, Heracles committed an unthinkable act. He attacked his own family, destroying the people he loved most. When the madness faded and he saw what he had done, grief crushed him. He could not forgive himself. Seeking redemption, Heracles turned to the Oracle of Delphi. There, he was told the only way to cleanse his soul was to serve King Eurystheus of Turns and Mycenae. Eurystheus, a petty and fearful ruler, was delighted to have power over the greatest hero of Greece. He devised 12 impossible tasks, hoping that each one would either kill Heracles or break his spirit. But instead, these labours would make Heracles immortal in legend. First task was to defeat the Nemean lion. This was no ordinary beast. Its hide was tougher than bronze, impenetrable to swords or arrows. Villagers lived in terror of its attacks, and no warrior had been able to stop it. Heracles set out armed with his bow, his club, and his determination. When he confronted the lion, he soon discovered that his arrows bounced off its golden hide. Realizing brute force alone would not work, he pursued the lion into its cave, where it had 2 entrances. Heracles blocked one entrance, trapping the beast inside. Then, in the narrow darkness, he fought it with his bare hands. After a brutal struggle, he used his immense strength to strangle the lion. Yet another challenge remained: how to remove its hide, since no blade could pierce it. Inspired, Heracles used the lion's own claws to cut through the skin. He draped the hide over his shoulders, wearing it as armor. The image of Heracles in the lion's skin would become one of the most iconic symbols of his legend. But Eurystheus was not pleased. When Heracles returned with the lion's pelt, the king was so frightened by his presence that he refused to see him face to face. From then on, he delivered instructions from behind the safety of a bronze jar, hiding whenever Heracles came near. For the second labour, Eurystheus demanded that Heracles slay the Lernaean Hydra. This monster was even deadlier than the lion. It lived in the swamps of Lerna, a multi-headed serpent with poisonous breath and blood so toxic that even a scent could kill. Worse still, for every head cut off, 2 more would grow in its place. Heracles did not face this trial alone. His nephew Iolaus came to help him. Together, they approached the swamp where the Hydra lurked. At first, Heracles struck with his sword, severing heads with his mighty blows. But as new heads grew back in pairs, the battle seemed hopeless. That was when Iolaus had an idea. Each time Heracles cut off a head, Iolaus pressed the wound with a burning torch, sealing it shut and preventing new heads from sprouting. With this strategy, Heracles gained the upper hand. He cut through head after head until only one remained, the immortal central head of the Hydra. He severed it and buried it deep beneath a heavy rock, ensuring it could never rise again. As a final act, he dipped his arrows into the Hydra's poisonous blood. From that day forward, every arrow Heracles carried was lethal, capable of bringing down even the strongest foes. Yet when Heracles reported his victory, Eurystheus refused to count the labor. He claimed that since Heracles had received help from Iolaus, the task was invalid. This was only the beginning of Eurystheus' tricks. He would continue to make Heracles' path more difficult, but the hero pressed on, undeterred. The first two labors had tested Heracles' strength, his cunning, and his ability to adapt. But many more awaited him, each more dangerous than the last. Heracles' legend had only just begun. With the Hydra defeated, Heracles pressed onward. His path was far from over, and King Eurystheus was determined to make each task more humiliating or impossible than the last. The next challenges would not only test Heracles' strength, but also his patience, endurance, and wit. The third labor was unlike the first two. Eurystheus commanded Heracles to capture the Cyrenian hind. At first, this might sound easy, a deer compared to lions and serpents, but this was no ordinary animal. The hind was sacred to Artemis, goddess of the hunt, and it was faster than an arrow in flight. Its golden antlers and bronze hooves made it both beautiful and untouchable. To harm it would bring the wrath of the gods, and to catch it alive seemed impossible. Heracles pursued the hind for a year across mountains, rivers, and forests. Day after day he chased it, never giving up. At last, he caught the deer while it rested. Gently, he trapped it without shedding its blood, careful to avoid angering Artemis. But as he carried the hind back, the goddess appeared before him, furious that her sacred creature had been taken. Heracles, respectful and humble, explained that he had no choice, the labor was a punishment, not an act of disrespect. Impressed by his honesty, Artemis allowed him to continue, so long as the hind was returned unharmed. When Eurystheus demanded the animal, Heracles cleverly released it at the king's feet before it could be taken. The deer bounded away, and the labor was complete. The fourth labor was another capture, the Erymanthian boar. This monstrous creature roamed the snowy slopes of Mount Erymanthos, terrorizing villages and destroying crops. Its tusks were like spears, and few dared approach it. Heracles set out into the harsh winter landscape, climbing the mountain until he found the beast. The chase was wild and dangerous. The boar charged through trees and rocks, leaving destruction behind. Heracles, with his unmatched endurance, pursued it relentlessly, driving it higher and higher into the snow. At last, the deep drift slowed the animal, and Heracles sprang upon it. With his incredible strength, he tied it and carried it down the mountain. When he returned to Eurystheus with the boar on his shoulders, the king was horrified. In fact, Eurystheus was so terrified by the sight of the snarling creature that he hid once again inside his bronze jar. From that day on, his fear of Heracles grew stronger. But it was the fifth labor that revealed not just Heracles' power, but also his cleverness. Eurystheus ordered him to clean the Augean stables in a single day. At first, this might sound like an easy task compared to lions and monsters, but the stables belonged to King Augeas and housed thousands of cattle. Filth had built up for years, so much that no one had ever dared attempt to clean it. The stench was overwhelming, the work endless. Heracles, however, saw an opportunity. When he approached King Augeas, he struck a deal. If he succeeded in cleaning the stables in a single day, Augeas would reward him with a tenth of his cattle. Augeas laughed at the idea, thinking it was impossible, and agreed. Instead of shoveling the filth, Heracles used his strength and his mind. He tore open the walls of the stable and diverted the flow of two mighty rivers, the Alpheus and the Peneus. The rushing waters poured through the stables, sweeping away years of filth in a matter of hours. By sunset, the Augean stables were spotless. When Heracles returned to collect his reward, Augeas broke his promise. He claimed that the labor did not count because Heracles had acted for payment. Eurystheus, eager to discredit the hero, sided with Augeas and declared the labor invalid. It would not be counted among the 12, and another challenge would take its place. Still, the feat showed Heracles' brilliance. He had not only strength enough to move rivers, but also the wisdom to use nature itself as a tool. Each labor revealed more of who he was, not just a brute warrior, but a hero capable of adapting to any challenge. By this point, Heracles had faced beasts of myth and tasks designed to humble him. He had endured a year-long chase, a battle in the snow, and the foulest stables in all of Greece. Yet Eurystheus was not satisfied. The next labours would test him even further, and soon Heracles would be called to confront creatures that belonged not only to the earth, but also to the heavens themselves. After rivers swept clean the Augean stables, Heracles had proven that his strength was matched by ingenuity. But Eurystheus was still not finished. The king searched for ever more dangerous tasks, hoping that at last one would end the hero's life. The next labours would lead Heracles into deadly swamps, across seas, and into the company of creatures so terrifying they were said to be born from the breath of gods. The sixth labour sent Heracles to the marshes of Lake Stymphalus, where flocks of monstrous birds had gathered. These were no ordinary creatures. The Stymphalian birds were sacred to Ares, the god of war. Their feathers were sharp as blades, their beaks bronze, and they fed upon human flesh. In vast numbers, they darkened the sky, spreading terror wherever they flew. When Heracles entered the marshland, he saw at once that conventional weapons would not work. If he tried to fight the birds with bow or club, they would scatter into the air, too many and too fast to strike. At this point, the goddess Athena came to his aid. She gave him a pair of bronze castanets, crafted by Hephaestus, the smith of the gods. Heracles shook them loudly, and the harsh clanging rang across the marshes. Startled, the birds rose into the air in a great swarm. As they took flight, Heracles drew his bow. One after another, he shot them down with his poisoned arrows. Many fell while the rest fled and never returned. The marshes were safe again, and Eurystheus received another unpleasant report of his success. The seventh labour was no less dangerous. This time, Heracles was sent to capture the Cretan bull. This beast had been a gift from Poseidon, god of the sea, to King Minos of Crete. But when Minos failed to sacrifice it back to the god as promised, Poseidon cursed the bull with madness. It raged across the island, breathing fire, destroying fields, and terrifying the people. Heracles journeyed across the sea to Crete, where he confronted the creature. The bull was massive, its eyes burning with fury, its horns sharp enough to gore through stone. When it charged, the ground shook beneath its hooves. Yet Heracles stood firm. At the right moment, he seized the bull by its horns, wrestling with the wild beast as it bucked and thrashed. His strength was unmatched, and at last, he forced the bull to the ground, binding it with ropes. Carrying the bull across the waters, he brought it to Eurystheus. The cowardly king was so frightened by the beast that he ordered Heracles to release it. The bull ran free and wandered until it reached the plains of Marathon, where it would cause havoc again. But the labour was complete, and Heracles' legend grew. The eighth labour was darker still. Eurystheus commanded Heracles to capture the man-eating mares of Diomes, the king of Thrace. These horses were no gentle creatures, they were savage beasts trained to devour human flesh. Their iron chains rattled as they pulled against their restraint, and their eyes gleamed with hunger. Heracles gathered a small band of companions and set out for Thrace. When they arrived, they fought against Diomes and his men. Heracles, strong as ever, defeated the king and devised a grim solution. He fed Diomes to his own horses. Once they had gorged themselves, their madness faded, and they grew calm. Only then was Heracles able to lead them away. He brought the mares back to Eurystheus, who, terrified as usual, wanted nothing to do with them. He released them into the wild, where they eventually met their end on Mount Olympus, killed by wild beasts. These three labours revealed a new side of Heracles. He was not only a slayer of monsters, but also a conqueror of chaos itself. He brought order where terror ruled, to driving away the flesh-eating birds, taming the raging bull, and calming the savage mares. Yet each victory also brought him closer to his greatest challenges. The next tasks would take him far beyond Greece, into lands unknown, to face creatures that belonged to the edge of the world. Having subdued birds, bulls, and man-eating mares, Heracles now faced tasks that would take him even farther from home. No longer were his labours confined to mountains, swamps, or Greek islands. The next challenges would carry him across seas and into lands ruled by gods and warriors. These were not only trials of strength, but also trials of diplomacy, courage, and endurance. The ninth labour sent Heracles to the land of the Amazons, a nation of fierce warrior women who lived on the edge of the known world. Their queen, Hippolyta, possessed a golden belt given to her by Ares, the god of war. Eurystheus demanded that Heracles bring this belt back. At first, the task seemed straightforward. Heracles journeyed by ship to the Amazon lands, where he met Hippolyta. To his surprise, the queen welcomed him. She admired his courage and listened as he explained his mission. As of respect, she agreed to give him the belt willingly. For a brief moment, it seemed that this labor would end peacefully, without bloodshed. But Hera, always seeking to twist Heracles' fate, would not allow such an easy victory. Disguised as an Amazon warrior, she spread rumors that Heracles had come to kidnap their queen. The Amazons, enraged by the lie, gathered their weapons and charged at him. A fierce battle broke out along the shore. Heracles fought bravely against the warrior women, his strength unmatched even among their finest. In the end, Hippolyta was slain in the chaos, and Heracles took the belt. Though the task was complete, sorrow weighed on him. What might have been a moment of honor and trust had been ruined by Hera's jealousy. Once again, Heracles had been forced to spill blood when peace was possible. The 10th labor was even more daunting. Eurystheus ordered Heracles to travel to the far western edge of the world, beyond the known lands, to capture the cattle of the giant Gion. This creature was unlike any foe Heracles had faced. Gion was said to have 3 bodies joined together, each with its own head and set of limbs. He lived on the distant island of Erythea, guarded by his herdsman, Eurytion, and a 2-headed dog named Orpheus, brother of the monstrous Cerberus. The journey itself was perilous. Heracles crossed deserts so hot that the sand burned his feet. In anger, he shot an arrow at the blazing sun. Instead of punishing him, the sun god Helios admired his boldness and gave him a golden cup, large enough to carry him across the sea. Sailing in this cup, Heracles reached the island of Erythea. There, he was met by Orpheus, the monstrous hound. With one mighty strike of his club, Heracles slew the beast. Eurytion, the herdsman, rushed to defend the cattle but was quickly defeated as well. At last, Gion himself approached, his 3 bodies towering and armed with weapons. The battle was fierce, for Gion was no ordinary foe. Yet Heracles, armed with his poisoned arrows and unbreakable strength, struck him down. With the giant defeated, Heracles gathered the red cattle and began the long journey home. Along the way, he faced yet more obstacles. At one point, Hera sent a swarm of flies to torment the herd, scattering them across the land. Heracles was forced to chase and gather them again, losing precious time. Yet nothing could stop him from completing his mission. Finally, he returned the cattle to Eurystheus, who sacrificed them to Hera in an act of spite. These 2 labors revealed how far Heracles' journey had taken him. He had traveled beyond Greece into lands of myth and mystery. He had stood before queens, battled Amazons, and crossed the seas in a cup of gold. He had faced a giant with 3 bodies and survived deserts and storms. His legend was no longer confined to one land, but stretched across the entire known world. But though he had triumphed again and again, his punishment was not yet over. Eurystheus still demanded 2 more labors, tasks so difficult and so dangerous that they would take Heracles into the very depths of the underworld itself. Final chapters of his journey were at hand, and they would be his greatest test. Having crossed seas and slain giants, Heracles was nearing the end of his punishment. Yet Eurystheus, still trembling with envy and fear, demanded 2 final labors. These would not only challenge Heracles' strength and courage, but also take him to the very edge of existence, where gods, immortals, and death itself reign. The 11th labor was to steal the golden apples of the Hesperides. These apples grew in a garden at the farthest edge of the world, a place guarded not only by the nymphs known as the Hesperides, but also by Ladon, a serpent-like dragon with 100 heads. The apples were sacred to Hera herself, given to her as a wedding gift, and to take them would mean defying the queen of the gods directly. Heracles' journey was long and filled with trials. He wandered through distant lands, asking where the garden lay. On his way, he encountered the Titan Prometheus, still bound to the rock as punishment for giving fire to mankind. Each day an eagle tore at Prometheus' liver, only for it to grow back by night. Moved by the Titan's suffering, Heracles killed the eagle with a single arrow, granting Prometheus relief. In gratitude, Prometheus advised him how to reach the apples. At last, Heracles found Atlas, the Titan condemned to hold up the heavens on his shoulders. Knowing that Atlas was the father of the Hesperides, Heracles asked him for help. Atlas agreed, but only if Heracles would bear the weight of the sky in his place. Without hesitation, Heracles lifted the vault of the heavens upon his shoulders, holding the crushing burden while Atlas went to retrieve the apples. When Atlas returned, he carried the golden fruit in his hands, their glow bright and divine. With Atlas tasting freedom for the first time in ages, told Heracles he would not take back the sky. He offered instead to deliver the apples himself to Eurystheus. Heracles, realizing the trick, agreed but first asked Atlas to hold the sky for just a moment while he adjusted his cloak to bear the weight more comfortably. Atlas, inspecting, took the heavens back onto his shoulders. Heracles then gathered the apples and departed, leaving the Titan once again with his eternal burden. With the golden apples in hand, Heracles completed the 11th labor. Yet this task, more than any other, had revealed not only his strength but his wit. He had bested the Titan, outsmarted the heavens, and defied Hera herself. 12th and final labor was the most terrifying of all, to capture Cerberus, the three-headed hand of Hades, guardian of the underworld. This was no beast of flesh and bone alone, but a creature of death, with a serpent for a tail and eyes that burned with fire. To bring Cerberus to the world of the living was to confront death itself. Before descending into the underworld, Heracles sought initiation into the Eleusinian mysteries, sacred rites that prepared mortals for a journey into the realm of the dead. With this blessing, he traveled to the entrance of Hades, where souls drifted like shadows and the air was heavy with silence. There he met the god Hades and his queen, Persephone. With respect, Heracles asked for permission to take Cerberus, promising he would harm the hand as little as possible. Hades agreed on one condition: Heracles must capture the beast with his bare hands, without weapons. Heracles descended deeper until he found Cerberus at the gates of the underworld. The monstrous dog lunged, three heads snapping, tail hissing like a serpent. Heracles grappled with it, wrapping his arms around the beast's necks. The struggle was immense, for Cerberus was not meant to be subdued by mortal strength. Yet Heracles' power was unmatched. Slowly, he forced the beast into submission, binding it with nothing but his arms and wool. At last, he dragged Cerberus from the underworld into the realm of the living. When Eurystheus saw the terrible hound, he was overcome with terror. Begging Heracles to return it at once, he hid once again in his bronze jar. Heracles carried Cerberus back to the underworld unharmed, fulfilling his final task. With this, the 12 labors of Heracles were complete. He had faced monsters, kings, gods, and even death itself. He had endured tasks meant to destroy him, yet each one only strengthened his legend. Though his life would hold more adventures, the labor stood as his greatest trial, a journey of punishment transformed into eternal glory. Heracles' story is more than myth. It is a reminder of the strength within us to face trials we believe impossible. Each labor, no matter how cruel, was met with courage, cunning, and endurance. From lions to giants, from stables to the underworld, Heracles showed that, even in suffering, greatness can be born. And so, the tale of the 12 labors has been told for thousands of years, passed from generation to generation, inspiring heroes and dreamers alike. Thank you for joining me on this epic journey into Greek mythology. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, subscribe, and share this video with others who love myths and legends. Until next time, may courage guide your own path, just as it guided Heracles.